Hello and welcome to the IRCC processing time. This is a virtual presentation. My name is Luciano Moro, and I am your resettlement educator from the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, ORAT. This session today is intended to provide information for those who have submitted their refugee sponsorship applications to Immigration Canada and are waiting on the next steps regarding their immigration application processes at the migration office or visa office overseas. Therefore, this session is intended to help you to understand what are the next steps that you need to do as you wait for your refugees application to be processed overseas. There will be a number of things that I will be discussing, and these will help guide you as you wait for your application to work its way through the immigration processes. Most of the information covered here is available on the website of Immigration Canada, but we have decided to summarize it to guide you on what's most important and to help you to know what are the key aspects as you await for the process. So here are some of the things that I want to talk about. First of all, I will briefly summarize some of the steps thus far that you have completed with ORAT. And then I will identify the key responsibilities for you as the co-sponsor or the constituent group for the application in process. And then we'll speak also about the Immigration Canada processes, the milestones that you have to look out for, and some of the factors that may affect the processing of your application while at the visa office. I will also talk about when you can request information from Immigration Canada to update you or your applicant on the status of the application, as well as when you need to provide information to the visa office or the migration office about your application. I will also touch a little bit about some of the delays or complications that may occur during the process of your application, as well as situations where a case receives a negative decision or is rejected. And then we'll talk about when you can contact our office ORAT about your case. And I will then demonstrate an example in terms of how you can check on your application file online from the website of Immigration Canada, as well as also helping you to establish how long your application might be in the process by demonstrating to you how to go about doing that on the website of Immigration Canada. Okay, so let's get started. So currently, in terms of the steps or the processes that you have completed at the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, first, you've participated in the Introduction to Resettlement information session, which was the first step to help you to begin the process of preparing the necessary forms to be submitted to Immigration Canada. Then you completed the required forms. Those forms were then submitted to our office and we reviewed them. And those forms now have finally been approved by our office and have been submitted to Immigration Canada. So this is where we are at. This is the stage where we are at, whereby your application has now been submitted to Immigration Canada. And we have you now attending or listening to this pre-recorded session on Immigration Canada processing times to help you to understand what are the next steps to take. Of course, there are other additional presentations that can assist you during this time as you also wait for your application to work its way through the immigration processes. That includes the budgeting and finance session. We also have the pre-arrival training session, as well as the welcome orientation session. So some of these sessions which will be attended by you subsequent to the outcome of your application process through Immigration Canada. So let's focus first on some of the responsibilities that you as a co-sponsor or the constituent group would be responsible for. So once your case is submitted to Immigration Canada, which in this case I believe is, since you are attending or listening to this session, it means that your application was approved and submitted to Immigration Canada by our office, and you have been advised or notified by our office that your file has been submitted to Immigration Canada, and now you are basically waiting for the processes to unfold. So the first thing that we would ask of you is that any communication or any correspondence that you receive, whether it is information that you send to Immigration Canada or that Immigration Canada sends to you, that you copy our office on all correspondences. That's very, very important because we need to be aware of any developments about your file. These can be communication coming from any of the parties to the sponsorship involved, whether it's Immigration Canada or from the refugee himself or herself, or from the Canadian Embassy, or from the UNHCR or IOM, which is the International Organization for Migration. So please make sure that you copy ORAT on all communication or correspondence, regardless of what it is, so that we're in the loop. Secondly, if there's any changes on your immigration file at all, whether it is a change of address, whether it's the email number which has changed or the phone number, or the refugee has relocated to a new address, please make sure that you update the visa office or the migration office, and also ensure that our office, ORAT, is updated on these changes. It's also your responsibility to ensure that when appropriate, you can follow up on your case, because as a party to the sponsorship, you fully have the right to request for information from Immigration Canada on the status of your file, or to update Immigration Canada on any changes to your refugee's file. Additionally, also, upon request from our office or from Immigration Canada, it's important that you provide the requested documentation in a very timely manner. This can occur most times in situations whereby the visa office is reviewing the application, and maybe additional information is required to be provided in order to continue with the review of the file. Therefore, it's important that you provide the requested information or documentation in a very timely manner. Obviously, we encourage very strongly that there has to be ongoing communication with the refugee that you are sponsoring to ensure that they are kept in the loop in terms of their process. Most times, the refugees have a difficult time in terms of accessing information related to their application, and therefore you as their co-sponsor or constituent group are the only conduit to provide information to them about their file or their application. So we strongly encourage you to do so, so that the refugees are aware in terms of the status of their application process and what's going on. Now, some of the other responsibilities besides the 5 that I've mentioned, include that for the duration of the sponsorship, when the refugee finally is approved to come to Canada, you as the sponsor is required to provide the refugee with care, lodging, and settlement assistance support for the duration of the sponsorship period, which is normally 12 months, starting from the day when the refugee arrives in Canada, or until such a time that this refugee becomes self-sufficient financially, or whichever comes first. Of course, part of these responsibilities includes covering the cost of providing rent, accommodation, food, clothing, household items, and providing for them the day-to-day living expenses, which are covered through the financial deposits that you submit to ORAT for the purposes of the needs of the refugees upon arrival. It's also important that upon arrival, you make arrangements to provide for an interpreter if the refugee applicant upon arrival is not able to speak English or French, so that they can be able to communicate. Make sure you make arrangements to apply for the necessary provincial and federal health insurance plans, including OHIP in the case of Ontario, and the Interim Federal Health Plan, IFH, as well as also enrolling children in school or adults for language classes in any case if any of them have children or have language needs. Introducing the newcomers to the various services in the community so that they can begin to integrate into the community where they're settled, as well as providing them orientation in terms of the different services available, whether it's banking services or showing for them transportation, how to move around using public transit, and helping them in search of employment. So that's really, really important. Lastly, your refugee, when they arrive in Canada, it's your responsibility to ensure that the refugee resides within the community where you, their sponsor, has settled. So the refugee is expected to settle within their community of settlement. This is the community where the refugee originally, in their application, has indicated that they will settle upon arrival in Canada. If the refugee moves out of this community where they're supposed to settle, it could have serious consequences, because that would be in breach of the sponsorship obligations. And therefore, it's important that you, as their sponsor, ensures that the refugee lives within the community where they're expected to settle. Okay. All right. Next, I will just briefly highlight some of the processes in the Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa, ROCO. So this is what your application process goes through. So initially, as you can see in this demonstration, once your file is submitted to the Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa, ROCO, then ROCO will confirm the submission of your application, and they will do their due diligence to check the application to make sure that it is complete, for completeness, to ensure that everything that has been requested has been provided, and the information meets Immigration Canada's requirements. If any of that is missing or something is not provided, and then the application may be deemed incomplete, and it will be sent back. Or if the application does not meet any of the requirements at all, then it may be rejected outright, and the application will not be returned, but a letter will be sent to the applicant and their sponsor indicating that the application has been rejected and the file will be closed. However, if the application meets all the requirements and is found to be complete, then the application will be approved and the case file will be transferred to the visa office overseas. And in that situation, then a file number will be generated, or what we call as the G number. That is the application number, G number. Okay. It's only then when a G number has been generated and provided that the application processing time starts. So that would be day one. Okay, so when you're counting the application processing time, day one starts when the application file number, the G number, is provided by the visa office or the migration office abroad to the applicant. Usually, when this application number is provided, it is communicated to both the refugee applicant as well as their sponsor, whether it's the co-sponsor or the sponsoring group, constituent group, as well as our office also is copied on this. So this, at this stage, is where you will be basically waiting for now the application to go through the processes. Once all the reviews are done and everything, then the migration office or the visa office will schedule an interview appointment with the refugee, where the refugee will be invited to come for an interview to attend. And depending on the outcome of the interview with the refugee, either their application for resettlement to Canada is approved, and then they move forward to the next steps, which would be to refer them for medical examinations, security background checks, and any other additional procedures that are required. Or if the interview was not successful, then the refugee applicant will be issued a decision letter, which is basically a rejection letter of their application for resettlement to Canada. Unfortunately, if that happens, that means that the refugee does not qualify to come to Canada under the private sponsorship program, and therefore they no longer have that option unless they go to court to try to seek for a judicial review of the application, which is a long process, but I'll speak to that a bit later during the presentation. Now, for situations where the applicant has successfully had a positive interview, immigration interview, then they will be sent to do medical examinations while security and other background checks are done. If all of that has concluded successfully, and then a pre-notice of arrival transmission letter or email is sent to the sponsor, advising them to be prepared to receive their refugee in Canada, meaning that the refugee applicant has successfully concluded all the processes, and Immigration Canada has issued them a visa to allow them to travel to Canada. Once that is done, then this notification is sent, the pre-nat, and we expect that the co-sponsor attends our pre-arrival training session to learn on how to prepare themselves to receive the applicant. During the pandemic, co-sponsors or the sponsors would be asked to confirm whether they would be willing and ready to receive their refugee or not. However, that requirement is no longer now in place. There is no need. You just simply receive the notification of arrival and just get yourself ready to receive your applicant. Once the pre-notification of arrival has been provided, and then after a few weeks, sometimes usually it's about maybe 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the situation. Sometimes could take more. Then a notification of travel, or what we call as the NAT, is issued by Immigration Canada, which provides the details of the travel itinerary for the refugee applicant, providing the flight information, the time, the date, the airline that they'll be traveling, and the port of entry where they will arrive. So then at that point, the sponsor is asked to avail themselves to go and receive their applicant on the set date when they are scheduled to arrive in Canada. And we will speak about that in detail in the subsequent presentations that we encourage you to attend. And then, of course, finally, you go to the airport to pick up your applicant or the refugee on arrival. So that's, in summary, just a brief outline of the process, the immigration process for your application. I will speak in detail about some of the stages in the subsequent slides ahead. So what are then the main milestones that you should look out for as you wait for your application to work its way through the immigration process? So right now, you are at the first stage here where your application has been submitted to Immigration Canada, and it is now at the migration office or the visa office overseas. And you have received an email confirming that your application has been submitted to Immigration Canada for processing, and you are waiting on the file number and so on to be issued. In some cases, you probably have already received the file number. So once that is done, then the file number or the G number is received. And once this file number has been received, and then the next stage is for the refugee applicant to wait for the migration office to review their file and schedule an interview for them to be invited. Most times the refugees are invited for interviews, but in some rare situations, the migration officer or the visa officer may waive the requirement for interview and simply send the refugees straight away to go and do medical checkups, biometrics, and other security checkups required to prepare them for a visa issuance. So this is something to be aware of or to keep in mind. The time when the refugee may be scheduled for interview varies depending on the visa office. And unfortunately, because of the large backlog of applications currently in process, that time could be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So it's a very long waiting period, but it is something to be expected. And so the refugee has to be patient, as well as their sponsor has to be patient in terms of these processes. Once an interview is successful and everything has gone well, then the next milestone is for travel to be arranged for the refugee. This is done by the immigration office or the visa office in partnership with the International Organization for Migration, IOM, or the UNHCR offices that are partner with the Canadian visa office responsible. If after following an interview or their migration interview, the refugee applicant has not received any communication about the results of their interview, let's say maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months have passed after the refugee's interview with the visa officer and there is no communication, we would encourage that the refugee provides us detailed information about what has happened and so on and so forth. And so at that point, you could follow up as well on behalf of the refugee to the visa office to inquire to ask for a status update about the applicant's interview results, so that if there is any situation which could result in a negative decision, our office may work with the applicant to try to address that before a decision is rendered on their sponsorship application. Okay, so these are some of the key milestones to look out for as you wait for your resettlement application for the applicant. Now, here are some factors that could affect the processing of the application or could cause significant delays. I had mentioned this earlier in my previous in the previous slide, but just to expand on a little bit, that the volume of applications that are pending review or that are in process could cause significant delays in terms of how long it takes to process the application at the visa office. Currently, there's a long backlog of applications, and so you can expect a long delay. And also, unfortunately, with the public service workers currently on strike, this labor dispute, unfortunately, could also add to the ongoing delays in terms of the backlog of applications. The other aspect is the number of refugee applicants that are being received in a given year to Canada or that are landed. If the numbers of landings is limited or is small, and then unfortunately it means the applicants in the pipeline that are waiting to be approved for landing will also be impacted. So that could result in a significant delay in terms of the processing. The security situation also in the country of asylum of the refugee applicant could also result in a delay of the application where there is ongoing insecurity or conflict that could prevent the migration officers from being able to conduct field interviews with the refugee applicants or to travel from one point to another to meet the refugee applicants and review their applications and conduct the required interviews necessary. The other delay could be that the visa officer has failed to communicate with the refugee applicant because the refugee applicant's contact information has either changed or is no longer working. Maybe their email address or phone number does not work. And so that could result in delays. Additional also, sometimes it takes long to complete the medical examinations or security screening of the refugee applicants after they've concluded their interviews. And so those delays also could impact how long it takes for the refugee applicant before they are finally approved to come to Canada. The family size of the refugees also could impact the processing of their application in terms of the various clearances they have to undergo, whether it's the security or medical checks. So that is also something to keep in mind. As well, also, if there is a change in the composition of the family size, meaning that maybe a newborn has been added to the family, or there is a marriage, or there's a death, or divorce, or separation, then that means the file has to be updated with these changes, and also that will delay in terms of the processing of the file, resulting in further delays. In some countries, refugees may not be issued exit permits immediately before clearing certain conditions or requirements. For example, in the Middle East, let's say Jordan or Lebanon, refugees who have overstayed their entry visas at the time when they are trying to exit the country may be required to pay fines for overstaying their visas, meaning that they were living illegally with the expired visas. Therefore, before they're allowed to exit the country, they're required to pay fines before they can be issued exit visas. So therefore, that could also cause delays in terms of their travel. And then in some unfortunate situations which are beyond the control of Immigration Canada, some delays also could occur. For example, the recent situation with the global pandemic on COVID-19, which has impacted the travel of refugees, and due to the closure of borders or lack of flights to book the applicants to be able to travel to Canada. So all of these things can impact the processing of the refugee application. So this is something to keep in mind as you wait for your application to be processed. Now, when is it appropriate for you to request information from Immigration Canada and also to update the visa office? Here are some aspects when I would encourage that keep in mind when to do so. The first is if and when your refugee application has exceeded the specified processing times indicated on Immigration Canada's website. Okay, so if they say maybe the application being processed at a particular visa office would take, let's say, 36 months, and now it is going to 40 months, and there has been no correspondence or no interview has been scheduled for your refugee applicant, at that point, we would ask that you go ahead and request for an update from Immigration Canada about the status of your application. Also, as I mentioned earlier, in situations where the refugee applicant was scheduled for an interview, did the interviews, and then 3 or 6 months pass without any communication about the results of their immigration interview, and with no travel or medical or other kinds of next steps being conducted during that time, then at that point we'd ask that you reach out to Immigration Canada to request for a status update regarding your file to see what is happening, so that if there's any pending issue that needs to be addressed, can be addressed in a timely manner. Okay. Now, when is it appropriate for you to update the visa office? Well, you need to update the visa office in the following situations. One, if the refugee applicant's information has changed, meaning that, for example, maybe they have moved to a new location. Refugees sometimes move places for any number of reasons. And therefore, they have a new address as opposed to the address which is on file. It is important that you update the visa office or the embassy with the new information about the new address where the refugee has moved. Or if it is just a change of email address or a phone number, the refugee has acquired a new phone number, or they lost the old number, now they have a new one, it's important that you update the visa office with this information, because the contact information on file is what always the visa office is going to use to communicate with the refugee. But if it's no longer functional or it's no longer active, then it's important that you provide the latest information to the visa officer so that they can be able to communicate with the refugee, and the refugee can receive also updates on their file. The other aspect is if there is a change in this composition of the family, meaning that if originally the family was a family of maybe 2 people or 3 people, and then maybe there is a newborn that has been born in the family, or there's it was a couple original, and then they got married, and now they have a child, they need to add that. Or if it was a single person and then the person decides to get married, then they need to add their spouse to their refugee application, and then that also needs to be done. Or if there's a separation, divorce, or maybe death that has occurred, it means the size of the family has changed. So all of these things require that you need to update the visa office with these changes, with this information. In some situations, perhaps maybe there's a correction that needs to be done to the spelling of the applicant. Maybe new information has come to light with documents which prove that the applicant's name is different from what was originally provided, or their date of birth, or some other personal information. Please, in those situations, it's important that you update the visa office so that your file, the refugees file rather, is updated with this information. Okay. Now, the other bit is in situations whereby an applicant had other family members who were non-accompanying, and those family members now have decided that they would like to join their principal applicant in Canada. That's the situation what we consider as a 1-year window of opportunity. This is when the principal applicant has already arrived in Canada, but the rest of their family members or their dependents who were identified in the original application need now to join the principal applicant in Canada. And then in that situation, within the 1 year, when at the time the applicant has arrived in Canada, we would need to update the visa office to initiate, to activate the applications of the non-accompanying family members so that they can join the main applicant in Canada. Okay, so in those situations, the visa office needs to be notified, and that process to be triggered. Okay, so in all of these, we would strongly ask that you, the co-sponsor, or the sponsoring group, update the visa office as well as our office, the Office for Refugees, on all or any communication whatsoever that goes between yourself and the visa office, so that we are in the loop of things. Now, beyond updating the visa office with any changes and so on, here are some situations which could delay or result also in complication of the applications. First and foremost, when those delays occur, it's important that you follow the due processes of updating the visa office using the web form, or you send an email directly to the embassy, which is responsible for processing your application. You can also, in situations where you are not able to do it yourself, you can contact the Immigration Canada call center, which has a toll-free number, 1-888-242-2100, in order to communicate any delays or complications that have arisen about your file. Additionally, also, you can use the services of your member of parliament. By that, I mean your federal member of parliament, your federal MP. Their offices do provide services or assistance for persons who have immigration applications, and they can assist you to follow up on those processes. You can also write directly to the Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, whose office is responsible for immigration files, to inquire about your application. Okay. In situations where there are complications or require maybe intervention of a third party, sometimes you can also seek the services of an immigration lawyer to act as a representative on your behalf. But those may be rare situations, but it's an option which is available as well. As I mentioned earlier, that in situations whereby the applicant who has had an interview and has had maybe 6 months or more without any communication about the outcome or the results of their interview, in those situations, we would strongly encourage that you ask your refugee applicant to provide the following information to ORAT, to our office at ORAT cases at toronto.org as soon as possible so that we may intervene. First, the applicant needs to provide a detailed and factual report about what transpired at their interview so that we know exactly or have a sense of what happened at the interview. Question, answer, and then an assessment of the atmosphere at the interview, who was there, what happened, what was their impression of the visa officer and those who participated in interviewing them, and then any concerns that they may have seen or identified or raised during the interview, so that ORAT will be able to take the next steps in order to try to address any issues before a decision is issued regarding the results of their interview. Okay, so usually any semblance of a delay, which is 3 or 6 months or more following their immigration interview, is a sign that there could be some concerns which need to be addressed or issues which need to be addressed before a decision is rendered regarding the application. Okay. In exceptional situations, sometimes Immigration Canada may choose to expedite some cases, meaning they may choose to speed up the approval of certain cases. One such situation is if the case is considered established to be a vulnerable case. Vulnerable cases are basically urgent cases in the definition of UNHCR, or the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, whereby Canadian migration officers can decide to waive certain requirements due to the vulnerability of the case, meaning that the person has a greater needs of protection compared to other refugee applicants, thereby giving rise to a heightened risk of their physical safety and well-being, and therefore they need to be immediately issued visas for resettlement to Canada in a very urgent and timely manner. Such situations can always arise due to circumstances which are considered to be very, very high, like, for example, lack of protection maybe from family members, or which is normally provided for family members. Situations like this usually occur especially for unaccompanied minors, meaning that children who are on their own without parents and so on, who have fled and need protection, or women who are found to be at risk, either due to violence against them from either their partners or spouses, or medical condition which cannot be treated or have no treatment locally and would only be provided treatment in Canada. In those situations, if the case is identified and determined to be urgent, then the migration officer may consider to expedite such cases. Okay. And in those situations, these cases are prioritized before other regular refugee cases, and the applicant in such cases could arrive or could be processed to arrive to Canada within anywhere 3 to 4 months time. But these are very rare situations, and therefore it is just something for you to be aware about, that in rare situations that the person's life is at risk, IRCC could prioritize such cases to expedite their processing, but the threshold to meet this definition is very, very high, and it has to be a situation of life and death. Okay, so something to think about. as I mentioned, that refugees have to undergo interviews. So we do usually provide an interview guide to assist the refugee applicants to prepare themselves for an interview. And this interview guide is available on our website, which you can provide to your refugee applicant to help them to prepare for their interviews in the event that they are invited to go for an interview. Okay. It's always important also that as they prepare for their interviews, usually Immigration Canada may require them to provide copies of certain documents. We ask that copies of those documents be retained by the applicant and also sent to our office so that we are aware of what has been updated and submitted to the visa office as part of the interview preparations. Okay. Now, following an interview, what are some of the things which could result in the rejection of the applicant's application for resettlement to Canada? There are a number of things. So first of all, sometimes the refugees, having waited for a long time in the country of asylum or where they have fled to refuge, find that maybe the living conditions are not favorable and therefore they are no longer able to sustain their livelihood. Finances may have become difficult. So some of them may choose to go back to their country of origin, maybe for a period to go and look for money and then come back. In those situations, unfortunately, the refugee would have returned to their country of origin and considered to have availed themselves to the authorities from whom they were fleeing persecution and violence, which was the original basis of their refugee claim. And so if that is found to be the case, then the application could be rejected by the visa office because they would have been determined to have voluntarily returned or repatriated themselves to their country of origin. In some situations, also refugees may find that they are able to settle in the country where they have fled in refuge and be able to manage their lives, meaning that they can work, they can attend school, they are able to travel, there's no restrictions on their freedoms. In those situations, the visa office could determine that the refugee has a durable solution, a lack of local integration within the country of settlement. So if that happens to be the case, the application will be rejected and the file closed. Okay. Then the last thing is sometimes the refugees apply to different countries for resettlement opportunities provided either through the UNHCR or another government other than their application to Canada. And if those applications are successful and they've been accepted to resettle to another country other than Canada, then the visa office can refuse and close their application because they have a durable solution to another country for resettlement rather than Canada. Okay, so this is something to think about. Obviously, the government of Canada takes the security of its citizens very important or very, very seriously. Therefore, if a refugee's application, in the refugee's application, it is found that the refugee was involved in criminal activity or in activities which are considered to be a security risk to Canadians, then their file could be rejected as well. This can include participation in organized crime or acts of violence, maybe terrorism, and so on and so forth. All of these things could result in the rejection of their application. The other thing which is fairly common for refugee applicants is that sometimes when they are narrating their refugee story at the interview, the information they provided originally in their application is not consistent with the information they share at the interview. And so that raises concerns of credibility, which would create inconsistency. Therefore, the visa officer could easily reject the application because of that, because of lack of credibility in the application. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. And the last thing, as I said, that if the refugee applicant's contact information has changed, please update it as quickly as possible, because if the visa office, the migration office, is not able to communicate or to reach the applicant after several tries, they can close the application file because they are not able to communicate or to reach the refugee applicant. So this could result in the rejection of the application as well. Okay. Now, in the unlikely or the sad situation that the visa office rejects the application, then what are the options of the applicant? Well, if the refugee applicant whose application has been refused is found to encounter this scenario, and then the refugee applicant, if they believe that the process which was arrived at the decision to reject the application was not fair or reasonable, then they can seek for a judicial review before the Federal Court of Canada. The applicant usually has 60 days after being notified of the visa officer's decision to reject the application to apply for leave and judicial review. In some situations, the court may extend that deadline, but usually it's just 30 days from the day when the letter of rejection is issued for the visa for the applicant to apply for leave of judicial review. There is no automatic right to reconsideration of visa officer's decision on an application for resettlement. Okay, this is something to be to keep in mind, that the decision that the visa officer issues is final on the application, and as such, the visa officers have the sole authority to make a decision on the merits of the case. So therefore, the applicant can challenge the decision by seeking for judicial review through a federal court, but this requires hiring a lawyer to be able to do that, which could be additional costs added to the applicant. But this is not a guarantee that the decision of the visa officer might be overturned. However, that option is there. Just to remember that the judicial review of a decision is not an appeal. Okay, you are not appealing the merits of the decision of the case, but rather the court will be examining whether the processes that led to the decision and the determination of rejection of the case were fair and reasonable. Okay, if the court determines that they were not fair or reasonable, then the court could issue for the original decision to be quashed and a new interview to be conducted by another visa office to determine your refugee application. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind that you need to be aware about. And this is very, very important, especially in situations where a negative decision has been rendered. Okay. Now, when would you need to contact our office about your case? Well, as I mentioned in the previous slides, that if an interview has been conducted and the refugee applicant feels strongly that probably they didn't do well at their interview, we would ask that immediately you contact ORAT, providing details of what transpired at the interview, factual report about the questions asked and your answers, and also your assessment of generally the situation at the interview, so that we have a sense as to whether to intervene and to follow up. Additionally, if say maybe 3 or 6 months have passed since the sponsorship application was submitted to the Resettlement Operations Center, Ottawa, ROCO, and no communication or email communication has been received about a file number, and then you can contact our office to find out what might be happening. In some situations, if the refugee applicant has found a durable solution, meaning that they have other options other than their application to resettle to Canada, and they would like to withdraw and close the application, then you as the co-sponsor can assist the refugee applicant to write to our office by completing the ORAT withdrawal form and attach the necessary supporting documents to our office so that we can request Immigration Canada to withdraw and close the case. As I also said, sometimes the family composition may change. There may be an additional birth or maybe a marriage or divorce or death that occurs in the family. If that happens, then you as the co-sponsor, with the help of the refugee applicant or the sponsoring group, need to submit to provide or additional information so that the file can be updated with the necessary forms. And also in a situation where there's an additional family member added to the application, maybe it's a child born, then it means financially there may be additional financial costs that need to be provided to the sponsorship so that the entire family can be supported on arrival. So something to keep in mind. Okay. Now, besides this session, there may be other additional sessions which are available to guide you during this time as you wait for your application to go through the processes, including the budgeting and finance, which I talked about already, that you can also participate. Okay. And of course, there is also the pre-arrival training session. This is once the application has been approved and the applicant is waiting to be scheduled for a flight to come to Canada. You need to attend the pre-arrival session. Or if the applicant has been issued a notice of travel to Canada, you can also attend that. And once the applicant has arrived in Canada, then there's a mandatory welcome orientation session, which is also scheduled for the newcomers to be brought or to attend virtually so that they know about their rights and responsibilities that they would need to be aware about during their sponsorship period. Now, I had promised earlier that I would show you how you can check on the status of your application online and what to do during this time as you wait for the application to work its way. So I will show you what you need to do in order to check on the status of your application online. Okay, so follow the slides as I explain how you can go about doing that by yourself. As long as you have access to internet and a computer at home, you can be able to do this yourself. As well, if your refugee has received an application number or what we call as the G number, then you can be able to do this checking of the status of your application online. So first, go to the website of Immigration Canada. What you do is you type www.cic.gc.ca. That's how you would access the website of Immigration Canada. Again, I would repeat, you type in www.cic.gc.ca. And once you have typed in, this is the page that comes up is this one. So you can select whichever language that is most comfortable for you, either English or French. For purposes of this demonstration, we'll use English. Once you've selected English, then it will take you to this page where you will see the services and information that is provided. On the right-hand column, where it talks about the most requested items, go to check your application status as indicated by the arrow here, and click on that. And once you've clicked on that, then it will take you to the next page where you can check your application status. And on that section, there's a drop-down menu whereby you have to identify the application status that you're checking. It's for refugees, as cycled with the red cycle there under refugees, and then you click on the button continue. Once you click on continue, and then another page will come up where it will ask you to check the client application status tool. Now the client application status tool is where you'll be asked to provide or to enter the file number and that kind of thing. So you click on that, and there will be some security questions that you need to read and then confirm that you have read and understood and agreed to the terms of those security questions. So you have to check off that box, which is cycled there, that I have read, understood, and agree with the above terms and conditions. Once you've checked off that box, and then you have to click continue to go to the next page. And then it will open you the client application status, wherein you need to enter the file identification number, so what I would call as the G number. So follow those prompts, click on the application number, the file number, and then you can enter the information that is requested there, the surname of the applicant or their last name or family name, and then the date of birth and the place of birth, and then click continue, which will take you to basically the next page. And once you have entered that information, then if it is all correct and good, it will automatically open the file that has been saved online about the applicant. Okay, you will see that it will show the mailing address of the refugee applicant at the top and the country where the application is being processed. And just as you look at the bottom there, it will identify the applicant and then the permanent resident application status. Most times you will see it will indicate that it's in process as cycled there. However, to see additional details about the application that is in process, you need to click on the in process tab. And once you click on it, then it will open another page where it will outline the stages of the application which have already been completed. So first, you will see that it will indicate when your application was received, the month when it was received, then when they started processing the application, and any other communication or correspondence that they have provided or sent to the applicant, and so on and so forth. So that is where you would find all the details of the application status. Okay, so that's really important that you do so as soon as you reach to this stage where it says the client application status. Click on the in process to take you to this page where it will give you the details of the different stages in which the application has gone through. Okay, so once you have done that, and then you would know exactly the status of your application. And then if you have concluded, you can log out and leave and close the page. However, if you want also to check on the processing time, like how long it is taking to process your application, you can also do so on the same page by selecting the check application processing time tab, which is on that same website. And when you click on it, it will ask you to basically select the the application type you're checking the processing time for. So as I indicated there, you select refugee, and then it will ask you which refugee program it is. Choose the private sponsorship for refugees program. And you have to identify where your refugee is applying from. So the country where the refugee is currently residing is what you would select. And in this case, you choose from the drop-down menu. It will give you which visa office is located in that area. And then once you have done that, and then you click on the last button, which says get processing time. So you click on that. And once you have clicked on that, automatically it will populate and provide you the average processing time for that visa office for privately sponsored refugees. And you will see it indicated in there so that you have a sense in terms of how long it might take to process the application in that location. Okay. Once you have completed that, if you have any further questions or inquiries you'd like to do, you can use the web form. So at the bottom there, you'll see there's a web form, which is circled there, right? You can click on that and the web form will open, which then you can use to send any updates or communication or questions or inquiries to the visa office. And the web form basically will ask you to identify what application you've submitted. It's usually the application for permanent residence. And you have to identify whether the application is being processed in Canada or outside Canada. Usually it's outside Canada, so you click yes. And then you choose the visa office which is processing your application. So that is where the refugee is located, which country. So you identify the country, and then you click on go to web form. And once you click on go to web form, then it will open the web form for you. And then the web form will ask you to provide the type of the application you're asking for, which is basically application for permanent resident in Canada that you're submitting the inquiry about. And once you have completed the details about that, then you can submit it and it will be sent directly to the visa office, which is responsible for processing your application. Okay, and then you can log out after you've completed, and that would be it. All right. So this information, I hope, has been helpful to assist you as you go ahead and wait for your application to go through the review process, however long it takes, depending on which visa office is responsible for processing it. If you have any questions, you can always go to our website, www.orat.ca, where we have details there. Additionally, we do send out also a bi-monthly newsletter with updates on any relevant issues or updates regarding refugee sponsorship. You can access that also on our website. It's available. And also we have a Facebook page where we post updates on any developments regarding applications that are in process and any updates that are coming from the Immigration Canada. So this is all the information that I needed to share to you. I hope this has been very helpful, and I wish you all the best as you go through the process of waiting for your application to work its way through Immigration Canada. Thank you so much for the opportunity and all the best. God bless.